Hey guys, thanks Marco. Thanks Angel and Eunice. Appreciate you guys having me here. My name's Dave Anderson. So as Marco said, I live here in San Diego. I actually live about 25 minutes north. I've had two companies. I started one with my family. I joined in 99. It was a travel tech company. Left that in 2013. And then I started a real estate tech company in 2015 called Lion Desk. And we sold it in 2021. The travel company actually sold in 2021 as well. And both of those companies combined were about 150 million bucks. The first company, I was 1 out of 5. The second one, it was just me. So I bootstrapped the whole thing. And like Marco said, I actually enjoy flying. So I get to listen and talk to air traffic control as well. All right, well, let me talk about the journey real quick. So I've got it up here. So in 2013, I left the travel company. I had a difference of opinion on the direction I wanted to go with the family members. Everything was fine. They didn't buy me out. I kept my equity. Like I said, there was 1 out of 5 of us, right? So then I took about 6 or 7 months trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. I didn't have enough money to just sit there and do nothing. I was in my 30s. And I had a baby as well. And so I was trying to figure out how am I going to make money. I actually applied to be like a Dunkin' Donut franchise, right? Like just go way off on the other side. Then I decided, all right, I need to do something I know what to do. That I know how to do, right? And that's build businesses. I was a software guy. I learned how to program myself when I was 8. I was doing BASIC, and then I learned Visual Basic, and then Turbo Pascal, and then Cold Fusion, et cetera, et cetera. And so I went to my first real estate conference in 2014, flew up to San Francisco, was sitting in the back of the room thinking, man, these realtors, there's a million of them. They're all making a ton of money. How do I take advantage of that? And so went back home and started just knocking on doors, right? I went to every broker's office I could find in town. I went to talk to a bunch of realtors, and I was asking them, how are you guys tracking your clients? Because when I was at the travel company, we basically built like this whole company management, which is CRM, transactions, et cetera. And so I would sit down with these agents, and they would show me their Excel spreadsheet, and I said, there's got to be a better way. So, of course, I decided to do it. Oh, there you go. Okay, so that's the first mock-up of Lion Desk, right? 2014. We create tools that help you sell more homes. So here's what I was just talking about. So in 2014, 15, market research, began development, and I did most of the coding myself. I did all the database structures. I actually put all the database stuff together first before I even started coding. 2016, I sold my first subscription. I was at a restaurant. I had no idea how to even take a credit card at that point, so I wrote it on a napkin. Probably not great. Then figured all that stuff out later, and then we really grew from there. So 2018 to 2020, we had a lot of sales, a lot of revenue growth. I hired the right people, and I'll talk about that. And then we exited in 2021. And when I sold the company, we had 60 or so employees, and then Arkusnexus was also there with us as our development partner. So CRM business, right? You're nuts. I heard this from a lot of people. Like, why would I build a CRM? There's got to be a lot of competition out there. There was. Again, I thought I could do it better. There was an incumbent. They had 70% of the marketplace. It was owned by Realtor.com. So it was an uphill battle. The thing is they were behind the times, right? So their technology was older. I integrated new texting. I integrated video. And the real estate business, like most businesses, are very relational. Right? Like you get to know people, and people do business with people they like. And I've always believed that. I had very little knowledge of the prop tech industry, right? I went to one conference at that time, maybe two. Again, my goal was to just try to find a problem to solve and then do it better than the next guy. So the things I heard was real estate tech is where dreams go to die. I actually use that quote now when I'm talking to people in the venture business. We were selling it for $25 a month. And it turned out that all those agents who I thought I had a lot of money, they don't. The average agent makes about 30 grand a year. They sell a home and a half. One of them is their own or their mom's. And they really are super cheap. My sister's been an agent for 15 years. She's incredibly cheap. So I should have known. So I thought to myself, risk, right? Again, back in 2014, I had a little bit saved up. We had a good company at the travel company. I figured, I could sell off my 401k, take the money from that, put it in, a couple $100,000, right? Then there was the stress, and you guys know this as startups, right? Then you have the expenses, and then the payroll, then the legal, HR, RevOps, dev team, servers down at 2 a.m. numerous times for me. There was a security breach, small, but it happened, which was then an employee issue. There was lawsuits at the end in 2019, 2020, TCPA. So all this stuff's coming up, and these are the types of things that I had to worry about all the time. What I wasn't worried about was my exit strategy. That was actually the last thing that was on my mind, right? What I wanted to do was build a product that people liked using, that they would tell their friends about. And if they could do that, I figured I would win, right? And if I surrounded myself with the right people. And so all of that boiled down to what I have these 4 things, right? The people that I had around me, the strategy that I was going to put in place, how was I going to execute it, and did I have enough money? And again, I'm talking about the LionDesk stuff, and so it was all bootstrapped. And so I had a little bit of cash, but not much. Again, I was doing my own development as well, so I didn't have to pay somebody 100, 200 grand a year to do that for me, right? And I didn't mind working all day long because I had nothing else to do other than the company. The people side was really important. I actually hired a high-level VP of sales that came from Staples. Great resume, super polished. Didn't work out. 2 months later, fired him. It was just terrible, right? Dumb mistake, and I knew better. Then I got somebody gritty, and I think she used that slide, right? You want that gritty person who's willing to do everything. So I was at this conference, and I ran up to a guy, and I'm like, hey, man, could you do me a favor? Just watch the booth real quick, right? And it was a cheap little booth. And I get back, and he's pitching better than I did. And I don't even know if he knows the product or not. So I'm like, all right, man, what's your name? His name's Randy. Randy and I get along. We went out to dinner. We had a couple drinks. He had actually worked in the real estate tech industry for like 8 years. And I said, why don't you join me? He moonlighted for about a year. The company that he was with actually ended up selling. Worked out great. And so he was one of the guys that I found that knew the industry, right? Because I didn't know these people. He helped me. We sat down and we came up with this 4-year plan. We were in this, excuse me language, shitty hotel in DC, cockroaches everywhere. And we put together a 4-year plan, right? What did we want to do? Here's our strategy to go after the market. We were going agent direct. We weren't starting on the enterprise side, right? A lot of companies were going after enterprise. We wanted to go ground game, right? So we went agent direct. Then that would get us into hopefully brokerage offices, which then get us into the enterprise stuff on the franchise side. And then in the real estate market, there's MLSs, right? So the MLSs hold all the listings. Maybe I can get a deal with them. Who knows? So we put all this stuff together. Then it was a matter of execution over the next 5 years. And then again, did we have the money? So here was our growth curve. And I'm sharing with you this, guys, it's not a big deal. First year in 2016, I made $14,000 in revenue and lost 165 grand. Right. Actually, this was my second year. And then we went from pulled in $500,000. I paid back the loan to myself. I could reinvest it. I got a nice little business. Next year, we doubled revenue and the net profit went down. Why? Because I put all the money back in the business. I didn't start paying myself, by the way, until 2018. Right. And then 2020, we doubled down again, and I put another $1.5 million because we rewrote the application because that I wrote originally was in PHP. And so we had to rewrite everything because it was just got too big. And so we rewrote the application, which ended up being a really good idea because during due diligence, we had a nice fancy new application where the old one was kind of, it worked. We obviously had a lot of people using it, but we needed to actually have something new. And so Arkus was involved in a lot of that as well. And so, again, was it an attractive acquisition target? It wasn't on my mind. Some people ask, why didn't I take investment? I would have if we didn't sell. I was going down that path, I think, in 2021-ish, right? Because of the growth, and we were trying to compete against, at that point, large companies were coming in, private equity was coming into the business, and so there was a lot of things that were happening in 2020, 2021 that were making me think maybe I need to get some investment on this thing. So here's the strategy. The first couple years, right? And those are clients on the left, by the way. So we had 32 paying clients. And then at the end of the year, we had 3,000. that was where I mentioned Randy, and he and I were ground game. We went to all the conferences we could. We didn't get booths, right? We got little hotel rooms if we could, or a suite if we could. Otherwise, we were just doing lobby con. And it was all about the relationships. And so I would go and find out who the speakers were that day. I would introduce myself beforehand, and I'd say, hey, man, my name's Dave. I'm not sure if you know me, but I'll buy you a beer if you can go mention me on stage. Worked almost every time, right? They'd be up on stage talking to 1,000 people, and it's like, oh, by the way, if you guys ever run into Dave and Randy over at Lion Desk, you should check out their product. And the next thing you know, we'd have a bunch of people talking to us, right? And so it was just the referrals and the relationships that we got out of that. The next year, we went from 3,000 to 10,000 clients. And that's when I really hired, some smart people to surround myself with, right? I hired a marketing person who was doing a lot of the branding, who knew the business. She came from a coaching company inside of the business, hired customer service reps, more developers, an HR girl who was able to do everything because a lot of the stuff I was doing myself. And we started doing more press releases. We were named to the Inc. 500 number 360 list. And then I was, for 3 years in a row, I was, one of the most influential people in real estate. That stuff to me was just all like extra, right? I was still focused on building this product that people liked using. And in fact, I had to pull myself away from the development stuff because eventually we hired much better people. And so then the third year we went from 10,000 to 25,000 people. That's when we expanded our channels, right? Like I wanted to be that Netflix button on the remote. So every time an agent logged into their broker system or their MLS system, they saw our logo. And so we had the first deal ever with an MLS where they offered a CRM. It was about a $350,000 deal for us. They paid us. Every agent in California got our system as part of their membership fee. I celebrated for about 5 minutes, and then we went on to the next deal. And that was one of the things in hindsight. We probably should have celebrated our successes a little more. And then the last year, the growth was just, thought leadership, industry expert. I mean, people were looking at us. We were really fast growing. We wanted to make as many connections with not just the relationships that we had, but with other companies. So when somebody had a new technology, they're like, hey, we also integrate with Lion Desk, right? Open API. So we did a lot of that stuff. And eventually, it all came to fruition, right? So in 2020, it was the end. And I remember talking to Marco, right? And talking to him and thinking to myself, do we pull back? And Angel and I were talking. I said, do we pull back now and save? Because everybody's, may not be here, right? We thought it was the end of the world. I mean, I was in Vegas when this thing went down and it's going to shut down Vegas. And sure enough, it did. Made the other decision because I talked to a lot of my friends and a lot of other companies that we're going to pull back. And I said, forget it. We're going to go ahead and double up and put the pedal to the metal, right? So we doubled the staff at the development and pushed forward to try to accelerate our development so we can get ahead of the curve while people were potentially pulling back. And it worked really well. So in Q3, I started getting some phone calls from private equity companies, from the CEO of Compass Real Estate, Robert Refkin, to a large title company, second largest title company in the world. And I was like, something's happening, right? Like you kind of got to read the room on some of this stuff. And again, I wasn't preparing the company to sell. I didn't even know what a data room was, right? I had no idea. And so started getting some phone calls and then started thinking about, all right, maybe now's the time, right? Pretty soon it turned into 5 interested parties. We had a few different LOIs for acquisitions. Some of them were garbage, some of them were not. And then I wasn't really ready for what happened because I didn't have all those folders lined up. I didn't have any sort of documentation. The finances were on a cash basis instead of like an accrual basis. So all this stuff that now I know now, I did not know then. And so over the course of about 90 days, as I was doing all this stuff myself, it was, 4 a.m., go to sleep, 5 a.m., wake up, do it all again, talking due diligence with all these tech companies that are analyzing the code. Luckily, I had really strong people around me, right? So I had my HR person help out on a lot of stuff. And so we went through the whole process. And in March of 2021, we signed the final LOI for Lion Desk. And I was at a lunch with one of the guys on my team, and I gave my team equity as well, right? I mean, that was part of the reason for joining a startup, right? It was an all-cash deal with an option to reinvest in the company. So there was no earn-out that I got. There was no, hold back on anything. It was just like, hey, here's the money, and if you want to join us, you can. I ended up staying with the company for 19 months or so. And then, on May 10th, the bank transfer was complete, right? So on May 10th, that night was the best sleep I had in the last 25 years, right? And it was just nuts. So, when I look back at all the stuff that I had to do, I would have done it a lot differently, right? I think on the dev side, we did it right. I think on the people side, we did it right. It's just the preparation for it. On the other hand, I had a company to run. I was still running a company. We had 60 people. We had 150,000 people using our system on a monthly basis, right, in terms of the agents count. And so there was a lot of things that were going on. But the team, again, you keep going back to the people. That's really what made the difference, in our company, right? Because there was better products, realistically. There always is a better product or a better feature or whatever, right? But when it came down to the acquisition, the way that I got introduced, and the guys that bought us was called Lone Wolf. The company, and like I said, I stayed with them until December 22nd, right? The guys that bought us were called Lone Wolf. They were owned by a private equity company. They bought 5 companies in a 9-month period, right? I was one of them. They bought this home spotter company, so he's my acquisition buddy on the same day, right? And the only reason that I got this intro to Lone Wolf was because I knew a guy named Kyle that worked there, who I tried to get a meeting with to do a deal with a couple of years ago. I kept in contact, and I would see him at these conferences, and again, relationship. And so he became a buddy of mine. Turned out that Lone Wolf was looking to acquire companies, and he was like, hey, you got to check out Dave over at LionDesk. Everybody uses them, right? Well, obviously not everybody uses us, but he said that. And so that relationship from that one guy got me the intro to the acquisition. And again, I put the slope to success isn't slippery. And what I mean by that is that it was lots of hard work. And you guys know this, right? It's not easy. The travel company that I was at from 99 to 2013, my grandpa started that back in the 60s as a brick and mortar agency, and we sold it again in 2021. So it was for my dad and my uncle who were co-partners on that thing. Yeah, that was 40 years, right? We did it in 6, which I think was an accelerated timeline for the most part. I always tell people, because I advise a few companies now, build good products that has a solution to an actual problem, right? Don't try to solve a problem that doesn't exist. I think a lot of companies do that. We created a couple of things at LionDesk that were mistakes, right? And we knew it about 6 or 7 months in, and then we're like, okay, we can't do this. We'll just go back, and refocus on what we need to do. Surround yourself with the best people. Fire yourself. My grandpa taught me that. He says, you may like doing what you're doing, but you're not the best person to do it, right? So fire yourself when you can with somebody better. That frees you up to do something different. Your brand, at all these conferences that I went to, I'd always go to them. Integrity and professionalism, right? Always go out there, talk to people. Nothing good happens after midnight, although we did get a big deal at 2 a.m. So almost nothing good happens after midnight. Still fun though. And customer service, right? Obviously that's a big thing. People, I think, will deal with a product that is a little buggy, especially initially, if you have good customer service. But if you have bad customer service, they're not going to deal with it, right? And that was the other thing my grandpa always told me: nothing takes the place of persistence and dedication, right? So you can have all the talent in the world, you can be the best developer in the world, but the persistence and dedication you put in is going to make you a success. And that's it. Questions?
You mentioned that you would have done many things differently. What do you think would be different in the outcome? Would you be able to go back and change those things?
Yeah. So there's just some small little things like price increases, right? Like we kept it at $25 a month. As soon as these guys bought us, they raised it to like $40, and that would have been like another $5 million for us. Like, could have had a faster plane, right? Just little things like that, right? On the product side, again, we made a lot of mistakes, but also I think we did more right than we did wrong. And you can't always make the right move, right? Like Eunice was saying, it's the maze and you hit the dead end. You just got to realize it, right?
So what happened the first time you were in serious due diligence and they said, cool, who's doing your development? You said, oh, Angel, a bunch of guys down in Baja.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we had two different teams, right? I had a team up in Vancouver that was a contracted team. And I was asking around because I was, kind of getting a sense of the room again of what was going on. The stock market valuations were outrageous, right? Like 50-1 PE ratios, just nuts. And I remember talking to a few guys that I know. I says, would it make a difference? Like, do I need to have employees on this stuff? Do I need to have a CTO? Like, what do you think, right? And the consensus was it would help if somebody was going to acquire your company to have some intellectual property that they're going to be able to acquire with it. And that would be the people. So we ended up having a PM and two other senior engineers that I brought on board from our contracted team up in Vancouver as like the core group. That being said, I don't think they didn't get rid of the Arkusnexus team, at least until I left in December the whole time. And so I think it mattered a little bit, but not as much as I actually thought it was going to, realistically.
Right. Other than the fact that you have a lot of potential buyers, this is back in 2021 when you're positioned to sell, right? What was the rationale that made you decide, okay, this is the right timing to sell my business instead of just continue on building more features, like getting more market shares, etc.?
They were going to give me like $40 million in cash. So, it was pretty simple. Right. There was other deals that were out there, right? One of them with Compass Real Estate, for example, right? So he said, hey man, we'll give you half cash, half stock. And I was like, well, yeah, it was this pre-IPO. And I'm like, well, that stock could be worth a lot of money. Turned out it was not worth anything at all, right? And it was before they actually gave the final number, right? It really was a decision. I talked to my number 2 guy, Randy, and I said, what do you want to do, man? Do you want to go for investment? Should we sell this thing? If we hit our number, we're obviously going to sell it. If we don't, what's the decision? And like I said, there was private equity companies that were coming in with billions of dollars, right? Zillow had just completed, a $250 million acquisition of one of the products that had been out there for 25 years. And our competitors, where we had some of these advantages, they were coming and getting better and better. And again, it was all bootstrapped, right? And so it was not like I could put in another $5 million the next year unless I was going to go out and borrow it. And so it was one of those two decisions, right? We would have definitely raised money if we didn't sell. It's just somebody decided to hand me a big check and, And again, like I said, I stayed there for 18 months or 19 months, right? Like I didn't want to be an a-hole. There was no contract for me to stay there, but I wanted to learn, build the relationships, and see like how private equity companies work. How do these guys have their meetings? Turned out their meetings were outrageous and there was too many of them. But now I have all the relationships with all of these money guys. So any companies that I advise, I can just send over their way to take a look at it at this point, right? Again, relationships. Cool. Thanks, guys.